Hi, everybody. Welcome to this town hall. If you want to take a seat so we can start. We have a busy program, so hopefully an interesting one. Okay, I can see you there. Okay. So officially, welcome to all of you to Sydney and to this town hall. I am Micheline Dion, your president for the year. It's a pleasure to see all of you in person again and some new faces. We're here in Australia, and here it's the customary to have an acknowledgement of country at the start of a gathering like ours. In accordance with Australian custom, I would therefore like to begin the IAA meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodian of the land on which we are gathering this week, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to their elders, both past and present, and their emerging community leaders. Today, as I said, we have a busy agenda. Yes, 3 topics. We have a busy agenda. So we have 3 topics illustrating some of the challenges in front of us as we reflect on how to prepare for such challenges. First, we will hear about an initiative done in collaboration with the UNDP regarding the need and the efforts to address the availability of actuaries in all parts of the world, starting one country at a time. Next, after a few years of restructure, it is time to review the progress made on the restructuring initiative of the IAA and address what it is left to do to ensure reaping the full benefits of the restructure project. In the last segment of our meeting, we will dive on one specific area of future developments, the one centered around the need to improve our understanding and assessment of climate and sustainability risk to fulfill our responsibilities towards our client and the society in general. I am accompanied today by our President-elect Charles Colling, our immediate past President Roseanne Harris, and our Executive Director Mathieu Langelier. So to start our program, you will hear from Mr. Jan Kellett, Team Leader, Insurance and Risk Finance Facility from the UN Development Program, the UNDP, who is joining us from Geneva. The UNDP address is an initiative led by Fred Raleigh and Masaaki Yoshimura with the help of Ken Mungen, the chairman of Milliman. Milliman works with the UNDP to build actuarial expertise in developing countries. Thank you, Fred and Masaaki, for bringing the UNDP to us today. Mr. Kellett, we're looking forward to hearing from you and learning about the UNDP initiative.
Very good. Thank you, Micheline. Can I just check that you can hear my words?
Yes, we are. At least I am.
Okay, that is good. Thank you very much. Let me just bring up a small deck in a moment. First of all, thank you very much. Pleasure and privilege to be with you all here today. Actually calling from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and we're on mission in East Africa. Actually, Ethiopia, one of those countries where indeed we are working with Milliman on the GAIN initiative. And it's a great pleasure to be there. So yes, colleagues, friends, my name is Jan Kellett. I lead UNDP's insurance and risk financing work globally and head of what we call the Insurance and Risk Finance Facility. Amongst other things, I also co-chair the Insurance Development Forum at the operational level. You may be aware that brings together quite a part of the insurance industry, amongst other things. So what I'm going to do here is to present, essentially answer 2 things a little bit through the presentation. On the one hand, what is GAIN? What is the GAIN initiative? That's what it's called. And also, why is GAIN important to UNDP? So I'm not actually going to, if you like, go through typical UNDP presentation of saying X, Y, Z, but actually I'm going to weave in what is UNDP through answering the question about what GAIN is and why we're engaged with it. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring up a presentation that I'm going to run through. So GAIN, the Global Actuarial Initiative, which, if you like, in terms of subtitle there, strengthening the actuarial profession in developing and emerging countries in order to promote economic stability and growth. I think it's pretty clear, if you like, what the overall initiative is all about. That's being the overall objective. Just to put some pretty faces on the screen there, this is Ken Mungan, who of course you know very well, and our administrator, Achim Steiner, the head of UNDP, signing our agreement to work together in New York last year. And it is a rather sizable commitment that Milliman has made, essentially $6 million worth of pro bono support, working alongside and integrated within UNDP programming in a whole set of countries over the next 3 years. So it's a really sizable effort. And I'm going to go through some of the details there. So essentially the program goal is this: enhance global sustainable development through the enhancement of actuarial profession in the developing world. And indeed, Milliman working with UNDP in UNDP target countries and with other stakeholders to advance the program goal. The overall being all about eradicating poverty. So the UNDP perspective, why GAIN? Why is this an important program? Why are we working closely with Milliman? And that is really very closely in some of our portfolio countries. So a little bit on UNDP. So you may be aware that UNDP is the development arm of the UN. We are there throughout, if you like, all cycles of countries, from the fragility and crisis and the humanitarian period all the way through to long-term development. We're in every country, from the smallest of small island developing states through to the largest of middle-income countries, and all in between, essentially 170 countries, with the overall goal to work with our member states in those countries to eradicate poverty and reduce inequality. And I don't think these sort of sub things here would be surprising to you. All about sustainable development, governance and peace building, and climate and disaster resilience. That's essentially what UNDP does, country by country. When you look at it, how does the financing piece fit in that? Well, actually, it all fits in that sort of, you look at that sort of second segment there. You have digitalization, you have strategic innovation and development financing. So our work on insurance risk financing is part of that development financing thing. It is not an end to itself. It is essentially an enabler, enabling us to deliver on poverty, on governance, on resilience, environment, energy, gender equality, which are, if you like, the pillars of our strategic plan, and everything fits into the Sustainable Development Goals and what we call Agenda 2030, that being the dates when hopefully the SDGs will be realized, although certainly most are not on track. Which of the Sustainable Development Goals does our work on insurance and risk financing most attached to, if you like? We sort of say it's these 6: poverty, zero hunger, health and well-being, gender equality, work, economic growth, climate action. That last one particularly important with growing climate risk. But actually, it's everything. If you look at our current portfolio, almost all 17 of the goals are in one way relevant there. We're entirely sector agnostic, so therefore the SDGs that we attach to often are as well. So now I just want to answer the question, essentially, why GAIN in 5 different ways? Why GAIN for UNDP? So the first one is just making a note of some of the catastrophic trends that we have before us. And I do not use that term, if you like, just for hyperbole, but actually it is catastrophic. And also the levels of financial vulnerability that we see in developing countries. So just to start, the top left and the top center figure, just those two, let's just pick those out. $270 billion of global economic losses from disasters in 2021, of which about 50% were insured. But that figure drops to as little as 3 and 5% in many developing countries. So the protection gap, which I'm sure a term you're aware of, is well beyond 90% in many countries. And then maybe just picking up that center one at the top, 97% of people in sub-Saharan Africa have no insurance coverage over any aspect of their life and living. Now that for me is a really critical point. So basically that says the entire burden of increasing climate risk, but also the financial part of climate risk and everything else sits squarely on the shoulders of every family, every community, business, and indeed nation in developing countries. It has not gone somewhere else. It is sitting squarely with them. Just a couple of other figures just here, which are not on here. So humanitarian need, which is the emergency side of, if you like, the development program of work. In the end of last year, the UN appealed for $50 billion of humanitarian assistance. Now, I used to work tracking humanitarian assistance back about 10 years ago. At that point, it was about 9 or 10 billion. We have seen humanitarian aid rocket towards now $50 billion a year. Now, if that is all spent, that is basically a third of all development assistance being spent essentially on keeping people alive. Now, there's whilst a lot of that is driven by, if you like, conflict, certainly not the whole burden of it, maybe 40% each and every year driven by climate and disaster risk, for example. So, what is the role, therefore, of insurance industry in order to actually build financial resilience and reduce this massive and rather perverse, keeping people alive, vast amounts of money? And maybe just the bottom right there, human development. So UNDP tracks human development, has been doing it for 30 years through the Human Development Report. It's only ever fallen in 2 years, 2021 and 2020, and because of COVID. So we can see here again the burden of risk sitting on families and countries. So why GAIN number 2? It's because it's a direct fit with the way in which we actually deliver our work. We work with governments and partners to develop programs on insurance. We're not an insurer ourselves, so therefore we work very much with industry. Practically, we are a one-stop shop for all of our country offices. We deliver through them. We are the technical part of it, but all of our country offices in all those countries I mentioned are really key. We harness UNDP's global presence and role. That's like, if you like, from the Insurance Development Forum all the way down to country offices. And these last two in particular attached to GAIN, positioning UNDP as a platform for increasing technical and financial resources. So rather than industry inventing platforms at the country level, especially in some challenging places, work with us. And then this fifth point, building upon and leveraging industry expertise. So the work of GAIN sits absolutely in our typical, if you like, business model for delivering development. The third point about why GAIN is relevant to UNDP, it's easily part of what we do. So in all the countries that we work, we almost basically do these 4 things: advocacy, research and evidence, the enabling environment, the conditions for insurance risk financing, product development, delivery, and the integration of insurance into development policy and frameworks. So actually the GAIN initiative touches upon all these: focus on data, focus on capacity of governments and industry, better products, because we understand actually how to price risk, and of course, how we can integrate this into things like climate policy and frameworks. Absolutely key, critically a part of what we do. The fourth thing, we actually are integrating GAIN into all of our work and actually strengthening our program. So this is just for you to see how our current sort of geographic footprint. And GAIN is actually in all of those programs, in all of those countries on the top there, what we call the tripartite agreement. The GAIN initiative is in one way started or underway in all of those countries, and actually growing fast. And then finally, why GAIN? Because of the direct line from financial from, if you like, actuarial expertise through to financial resilience and growth, which I'm sure you know very well. Better functioning of insurance markets, better inclusive insurance, more price risk responsive, more affordable, building financial resilience, protecting development gains, allowing governments and families to invest more, and stimulating and investing growth by stripping away uncertainty and risk. The virtuous circle of increased insurance penetration driven by better actuarial expertise and capacity. So where are we now with the project implementation and progress? And here I am thanks to the Milliman team for sharing the most up-to-date data. Just so you see how does it actually work at the country level. So on the UNDP side, we're focusing on the public policy side of things, strong focus on governance, integration, development, and then the mechanics of GAIN, hosting and convening and bringing all the parties together and ensure that it's integrated into wider efforts. Milliman bringing in the actuarial expertise and capacity, an assessment of the situation, developing a roadmap, and then actually developing a plan of action to actually develop capacity. That's essentially what it looks like at the country level. So the situation assessment, looking at these sort of 4 broad areas: public policy and regulation, thought leadership, professional development and networking, what kind of expertise and climate risk exists, and data quality and accessibility, which Milliman delivers in all of the countries where it is working with us under the GAIN initiative. I don't think you'd be surprised by the key stakeholders in terms of the initiative. Of course, UNDP, both the global team and the country offices, but also, the regulators, the disaster risk and insurance authorities, ministries of finance, insurance companies, insurance associations in country, etc. These are the typical stakeholders in all of the countries. And then the key steps, first step being the preparation for the in-country work, where we're heavily engaged in sort of setting things up and getting the foundation set. Secondly, the assessment trip, which the Milliman team does, meeting with all the relevant stakeholders and establishing a working group to help drive the change that they like to see later. And then they've admirably also sourced a lot of ambassadors from within their ranks to actually work and support the work as it moves forward. And the actual, if you like, the actual bones of it, in the sense, this is what it really is looking to do. So on the one hand, enhancing capacity, enhancing the actuarial profession in target countries by working with associations, universities, actuaries, etc. Just as a sort of another data point, I met with the head of the Financial Regulatory Authority of Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh in the last climate negotiations. And he was saying, a country of that size, 100 million, middle income country, there are only 30 trained actuaries in the whole country. I mean, that's actually incredible, really, to imagine. So just to see some of the needs, even in countries which we might imagine are actually growing and well advanced in a certain sense. Secondly, a big focus on enhancing data and the effective utilization of that data through working with regulators and the insurance industry and the data owners, the people that actually have the keys to the data which can drive an better understanding of risk. The third one being the focus on climate risk itself, in adapting with more resilient risk management to help mitigate financial impacts of climate change, that being the biggest, if you like, negative transformation which many countries and communities are going through, and then a focus on advocacy. So this is really what the program does. That's the, if you like, the transformation part. And just as a final slide, this is what it looks like programmatically. These are all the countries where we're working with GAIN. You can see a wide range indeed from middle income countries, small island developing states, and geographically all around the world. Already 4 quite advanced in terms of the work. I just put it at the top right there: Nepal, Egypt, Nigeria, Colombia. This year's batch of countries already featuring Ethiopia, Tanzania, Ghana, Ecuador, Dominican Republic, Madagascar, and Vietnam, and a whole set of others coming along as well. And what I would say is that we're actually having quite a lot of demand coming from countries and our country offices because they hear about the GAIN initiative. And this is great as well. So something which we hope that we will be able to advocate for our friends in Milliman to be able to resource as we move forward and perhaps grow and enhance the work. So that's really it. That's the end of the presentation, except I wouldn't end without just making a bit of a thank you to the Milliman team. So the work being led by Queenie, who you may know, I imagine, and all of the colleagues there. And make also a note with Michael McCord as the head of the Microservice Network, Centre, the managing director as well, and of course Ken and all of the team across Milliman who have put so much effort into this, and really it is a fantastic piece of work. And that it is. That is here. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kellett. It seems that we already have some questions. Christian, can you help us with the questions from online?
Sure. So the first question that came in online is, I'll read it out. It says, how have you considered actuarial density and actuarial penetration to estimate the number of actuaries possible in emerging and developing geographies?
I am going to be honest and say, I have no idea how to answer that question. So this is where I'm going to say, Milliman, are you there? Please do help us out. But that seems like a very relevant question. But I'll go back to my note on Egypt. Surely 30 in a country the size of 100 million people, middle income, is not enough. That's not really an answer, but I hope that might be a politician's answer.
I think, yeah. Do you have a second question?
No, that's all we have.
Okay, so we can take a question or two from the room. If you have one burning question. Okay, I don't. Maybe you can be more making noise if you have. Okay. Well, you have.
Yes, I'm interested in how the GAIN initiative allows for innovation in the countries themselves rather. I'm interested in how the GAIN initiative might allow space for innovation in the countries themselves rather than adopting, Western or developed country models that we leave space for innovation that we've already seen elsewhere in terms of, you know, microinsurance and leverage of the mobile phone network. So just kind of interested to hear about that perspective. Thank you.
Would you like me to take that one, Micheline?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, my understanding that the trick is the assessment. So what the assessment does is assess not only, if you like, what are the sort of standard conditions in those 4 areas that I mentioned in terms of understanding of data, climate risk, etc. But within that also look to adapt the program of work to the ideas that are already there and coming out of each of the countries in terms of both the insurance side as well as the government side. But I would say it's also one of those areas which can certainly grow and improve, but it's a well-taken comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kellett, for both for your presentation and for the UNDP commitment to develop actuarial expertise around the globe. We indeed need to ensure available, well-trained actuarial resources in every parts of the world. There is not a lack of problems to analyze, understand, and address. We need to face the challenge of the recent increase in uncertainties. And so sincere thanks to the UNDP for the great work that you do.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure.
Now let's go to, oh, maybe I should. Okay, yes. Yeah. Now let's go to look at what where we are with the restructure of the IAA, and how we intend to improve it to maximize the benefit to the profession. For the restructure update, who best to give an update than Charles Colling, current IAA president-elect, past chair of the Advance Committee, and engineer and advocate of the restructure. Charles will be followed by Ralph Blanchard, vice chair of the Advance Committee, on behalf of Barbara D'Ambrogi-Ola, the current chair of the committee, but who's could only join us later today, unfortunately. The travel issues. The Advance Committee is responsible for moving the restructure forward, ensuring the best use of our forum resources and fostering the enthusiastic contribution of forums to advance the actual profession. So Charles.
Thank you, Micheline, and good morning, everyone. Lovely to be with you here in Sydney. Wonderful city, my first time here, and I hope not the last. Now, how do I, is that one? Green button. Yes. Excellent. I've gone too far. How do I go back? There we are. Right, good. No, I've got it. I've worked it out. Right, splendid. You've heard me say a lot of this before, so I won't dwell for long on this, but it's important just to look back as to how we got to where we are today. And it started back in 2017 when there was a feeling that not only was the way we paid our fees not working, but that we weren't aligning interests of FMAs to the resources and costs of the IAA. So great work was done initially by the fees task force, looking at how we fund the IAA, and the whole issue of ensuring that we start to focus our activities on what are the key issues for FMAs really began to emerge. Out of the fees task force, we saw a change in how we calculated fees, and we saw a change in the sort of terminology of members, from fully qualified actuaries to members with an actuarial credential. And one of the things that was very obvious in those discussions, which were at times quite tricky, was that council was not the most effective way for having strategic discussions. And the model of having the fees task force was hugely valuable. So when we then went on to the full renewal task force that kicked off in 2018, again, we looked at how can we improve our governance and structure so that we can ensure that there's a core way of having strategic discussions which are too unwieldy at council, but also how can we change all of our governance structure to focus on what FMAs really want and is important to them. So we set up a task force with members from 14 different FMAs, and we involved the sections because it was really important that they were part of those discussions. And out of that, we refocused how we were arranging things, ensuring that FMAs were at the heart of decision making, and that what we were doing maximized the interests of FMAs and what they wanted the IAA to be doing. We developed, you will recall by then, a simplified mission statement focusing on 3 key areas from the 6 that we'd previously had. Much easier for us all to remember just 3, and we chose them on our acronym. So we had an I, an A, and an A. We had impact, assure, and advance. The impact, recognizing a really key role of the IA, was focusing on our relationships with supranationals. Assure being the area of looking after the profession and promoting the future of the profession, and advance being the area developing the expertise and the knowledge of the profession. So they became our 3 key focus areas. And we created new entities that ensured we delivered on that. Most specifically was the Strategic Planning Committee, the SPC, a much smaller version of council, but far more effective at having difficult strategic discussions, looking at key topics, helping us to develop long-term strategy, and allowing us to look at what is it that we wanted to focus our resources on. The other key thing that we created was the advance function, the advance committee, which was created to oversee the work that's being done to share knowledge and share expertise across FMAs, nurturing, developing FMAs, but also ensuring that developed FMAs could learn from each other. Something that personally I've benefited hugely from my time within the IAA, hearing all the ideas from different parts of the world really enhances what we as individual actuaries, as well as countries and FMAs, are able to bring to the work that we do. So I'll hand over to Ralph now just to talk a bit about the work of the Advance Committee.
Okay, with regard to the Advance Committee, again, the Advance Committee provided had reporting to it under this new structure, forums. The forum, let's see. Need to move on to the next one. Okay, there are 2 green buttons here, by the way. That's the confusion. You have to hit the top green button. Okay, so the sharing function was handled through the creation of forums that report to the Advance Committee that were supported by the FMAs. The process the Advance Committee did was at first try to find out where there was sufficient support from FMAs. The result was 9 different forums. Some previously were committees, some previously were working groups, but all had sufficient support from FMAs. The main function was, again, the sharing of information and knowledge among the FMAs. but an important role that to date hasn't been stressed enough is horizon scanning, identifying where the FMA or where the IAA should be providing more feedback, more focused, and potentially work products. All FMAs can have one member on the forum and an unlimited number of observers. Part of the intent of that unlimited number is to help get new people, the younger actuaries, different actuaries involved in the process, so that the IA isn't just the same people coming, despite the fact that we may appreciate seeing each other each year or every 6 months. We need to keep the new blood flowing through the organization. And the participants are there at the forum to represent the FMA, not to represent their view, but it's supposed to be representing things that would have the FMA support. With regard to the doing function, the feeling was that should be handled through time-limited task forces to deliver a certain approved work product. So they would be delivering webinars or research papers, et cetera, and sometimes responses to supranationals. And the members of these task forces would be selected based on expertise. They wouldn't be restricted to a particular forum, committee, or whatever. They would be just reached out and the task force formed based on where the expertise was. So what are some of the questions that arose from this new structure? One of them is, does everything have to be pre-approved by the SBC Council? And the answer to that is no. The SBC and Council they're in charge of strategic direction, not operational issues. So for the more detailed operational items, you don't need to have the SBC or the Council, SBC and Council support. That said, again, the Advance Committee was set up as a governing body over the forums, so that if the intent is to have a new work product that would be disseminated with the IA stamp outside the IAA, you would need the Advance Committee approval. One of the things that has come up is if it's just a desire to have something internal to the forum, a webinar or a paper, to stay within the IAA, that's not meant to have the Advance Committee approval. So again, but for new initiatives, the SBC and Council are only involved in strategic discussions, not operational ones. Why do we need to approve statements of intent or SOIs for any new initiative? Well, first of all, there has to be some way of making sure the FMAs know where people want to utilize IA resources. And also it gives the FMAs, besides just notice of what's being intended, it allows them to actually contribute to the direction. Their feedback can be incorporated to focus the direction, to focus the initiative, and maybe modify it or change it. And after the SOI is created, it doesn't mean that everything is rigidly dictated as far as what the work product will be. There's always going to be unplanned items, but that's where the EC needs to be involved to approve any unplanned items that weren't necessarily anticipated in the SOI creation. But the SOI also helps provide direction to the people doing the work product. You don't give a task force, you don't give a task force a charge that's ill-defined. So the SOI helps give a clear enough charge, hopefully, to the task force that's creating the work product. How are forums different from sections? This has come up. The answer is pretty straightforward and simple. Forums have the membership of forums are FMAs. The membership of sections are individuals. The direction of forums are guided by FMAs or FMA representatives. The direction of sections are guided by the individual members. So, the forums are for the sharing the information among the FMAs. Again, the focus is FMA direction, FMA interest. The FMAs also control who attends as members and who attends as observers. Where sections, it's the individuals in charge. you know, a question came up of why can't forums do anything? Well, the reality is they can. You know, the forums start off with a chance for having, you know, sharing information, discussion on specific topics. Hopefully that sharing can lead to ideas for where work products are needed. The advanced committee provides a, you know, a governance function to make sure whatever, you know, people want to have done, if it's going to have an IAA stamp, it has sufficient IAA, has sufficient FMA support. But again, you know, it doesn't mean that the FMA, doesn't mean that the forums can't do anything, can't suggest work products. It's just that they need to pass the recommendation for the work product by the advanced committee. And then if approved, a task force is created. So the forums play a crucial role in identifying where things need to be done. You know, what are emerging issues that need to be addressed? What existing issues are being under-addressed? They also provide resources so that if you want to create the task force, you have some idea where you may look for members. So what did we learn from all this reorganization, restructuring? We need to better articulate how we govern our IAA entities. One of the things that we've been learning in the last couple of years, we need to clarify the role of forums, you know, energize their members and enable and stress also the fact that they are involved in scanning for potential future projects. We need to look to the future of the profession to guide our work in task forces. They can't just be insular in our thinking. When we respond to the supranationals, that's part of the impact function, we need to be cognizant that when a supranational asks us for input, it usually comes with a time restriction. So we better be responsive if they want to keep, you know, if we want them to keep coming to us. We want to utilize the mobilized tools for all IA entities. This hopefully will reduce the email volume. And even now that I'm retired, I still get over 50 emails a day. So we need to remain nimble. You know, if you don't keep adapting, and if you're not always looking at how to improve, eventually you start to decay. So we need to maintain nimble and flexible. One example was merging the pension committee into the pension forum, hopefully being more efficient with that structure. And we need to be proactive with regard to strategic priorities.
You want to take some questions? We can take a quick question. I see one over there from one of your constituents.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I don't want to shoot on the advanced committee, but you mentioned, this is Mark Tardif, you mentioned that the committee needs information from the FMAs to see what are they looking for, and even at the forum level. I'm a little confused I mean, not confused. I mean, I'm having a bit of uncertainty on how the FMA communication between either advanced or one of the forums work. I'm on a forum, and I keep reminding my members, we are supposed to work on stuff that FMAs are looking for. And so don't think what you want, but go. And that's like the mechanism between the FMA and the individual that is representing the FMA is there's some uncertainty, in my opinion.
Granted, and it's going to vary for FMA by FMA. Each FMA is structured differently based on many different factors, including their size. Especially if you're dealing with, my suspicion, a forum where English is not a primary language. So there definitely are communication issues, but the intent was that whatever's done would have the support of the FMA. So the representative from an FMA on a forum should have some way of confirming that where they're headed isn't counter to the FMA, and the FMA wouldn't challenge that use of resources. So the FMA representative at a forum needs to have some process to make sure that the FMA supports what they do. Doesn't mean they need prior approval, doesn't mean they can only say something if the FMA officially approves what they're saying. But the structure was created to try to avoid having people coming up with, as individuals, what they'd like to work on and they'd like to see, with no touchback to the FMA that's actually funding the work. Gabor?
Hi.
We have-
Okay. What I would encourage you, Gabor, maybe you want to talk
just-
to Ralph.
One more?
Sorry.
What?
The light.
I'm sorry.
Just one more.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just asking.
Yes, please.
John Robinson, Society of Actuaries. I noticed in your description that, you know, the forums consisted of all volunteers. And you talk about processes and so on. And I just wondered, you know, in my organization, we have the benefit of a pretty solid staff function, pretty substantial. And anchoring things in the staff sort of, you know, helps things to be consistent as time goes by. So what is perhaps the current state of the staff function in the IAA? And what are your aspirations for the future on that?
Yeah, Micheline, I believe that's more yours.
Sorry, I'm not sure that I have understood it well. What's the role of the staff function for forum? It's to support. I guess, encourage making sure that whatever the remit of the different the committee sections are basically we stay within what is expected of each of the groups, and it's also to remind people to the sensitivities of the different groups. So I'm sorry, I have a feeling I'm not fully responding to your question.
No, you have.
Okay.
And so my question is, you know, is there any thought about what the future might look like for the staff function?
One of the things that we've been discussing recently is in terms of onboarding, making sure that people are comfortable with their role and so on. So often it's there's new members coming in and with very different background, as was indicated by Ralph. I mean, very different associations and different ways. So we're going to tighten that and give a mission to staff to do more of that. And I'm looking at Mathieu. I hope I am portraying this correctly. But yeah. Okay. So, okay. Oh, you were to talk. This is why I was not completely out of. Okay, so.
Thank you. So I've always thought that town halls are for giving information, providing some information, as well as providing topics to be discussed throughout the IA meetings. So when it came to the presentation on the restructuring or renewal, I thought that there would be some thoughts on what has been good, what has been success, what are needed to be improved. So kind of an assessment of where we are. I think the IA needs to do that, and I'm afraid I haven't heard too much about that kind of assessment, and encouraging everybody who attends the IA meetings to think about we understand where we are, but more and more systematic assessment of the goods and not so goods, and what's ahead of us in terms of it's not just the SPC and the AC. There's the meeting schedules and other stuff that came with the renewal. Perhaps there's time to start thinking about of the future systematically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabor, and I can assure you that we spend a fair amount of time within the officers to discuss exactly about that. There's some progress being made, I think, on advance, and certainly the thinking is evolving, but we're taking this very seriously, I could say. So we'll see if we in 6 months whether you see that difference, or 6 months or a year, but yes, we definitively want to do that. At this point, this concludes the second part of our meeting. One thing that I absolutely want to do is recognize, well, first thank Ralph and Charles, thank you very much. But then also recognize the many volunteers within the IAA for which, without which we would not be who we are. So what I would ask is, as I mention your name, please stand up so people can see you. And then as I'm going to name all the people from your, here I guess it's the executive committee, but by groups, and we're going to applaud you. And then after that, we'll pass to the other groups. So. First, from the executive committee, I'd like to recognize Gunn Albertson, Al Beer, Jerry Brown, Jill Hoffman, Jacques Tremblay, Lisa Wade, Peter Whitty, Peter. So you can see them, and let's applaud them for that. From committee chairs, I'd like to recognize Andrew from Actuarial Standards, Mohamed from Advice and Assistance, or to be from Assistance, Barbara from Advance, Brendan from Audit and Finance, Enning from Education. Brendan, please. Enning, and also say, well, yes. And Derek from Insurance Accounting. Also from, because I had 2 slides for the committees, Nick from Insurance Regulation, Mike from Membership, Jan from Nomination, Peter from Professionalism, and the last but not the least, Roseanne from Strategic Planning. Gives them a round of applause. Also want to recognize the forum leaders, Paul from Enterprise and Financial Risk, Bill from General Insurance, Terry from Health, Jason from Pension Benefit and Social Security, Michael from Banking, Ashley from Data Analytics, Nigel from Inclusive Insurance, Mark from Mortality, and Resource and Environment RAID. I should not forget the section chairs. They're also very important. Alexander from Afir ERM, Eric from Aston, Ed from the health section, Thomas from life section, Brian from the IACA, and Doug from PBSS. And lastly, I want to recognize the people that are supporting us, the staff. Without them, we would not be able to do the job that we're doing. So from the executive department, Mathieu, from Caroline and Nora, sorry, also Anne, Tasha, and Anne and Tasha. From communication and membership, Christian, who's been very busy these days, Carla and Tip Boho. From finance, Caroline. From technical activities, Emily, and supporting her, Nancy. Thanks to all of you and the remaining 800 and more volunteers, including a number of course, some of you in the room, that makes the IAA the strong organization that it is. So it's all of you too that I'd like to thank. We are now at the third and last part of today's agenda. We do have a significant number of projects going on regarding climate and sustainability. These are not the only projects going on. However, it's a sizable set of projects. And we thought that it would be worthwhile to take the time to explain the links between them and help you find your way through these initiatives. Some have gotten their green light as early as 2020, or maybe some places it was late, but still time passes by. And potentially will conclude their work around the end of this year or early next year. Some have just started, or some are about to start when you give the green light in a few days from now. These projects are very important for the future of the profession. They are building on what we already do as actuary, but at the same time bring us outside of our traditional paths. The purpose of all of these projects is to ensure that we address evolving source of financial uncertainties. Let's hear directly from the chairs of each of the project. Gabor, you want to, as I speak, you may want to find your way through here. What is currently going on, starting with the CRTF, whose statement of intent was approved in 2020. Gabor, it's yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So indeed, the statement of intent for the climate risk task force and the activity of the IAA on climate risk related activities was approved by Council in May 2020. Okay, I see that my time is allowed. Good. And initially, Micheline chaired that task force, but fortunately or unfortunately, she was elected as president-elect, and then I took over the leadership of this task force. And indeed, the major goal for the task force is to promote actuarial approaches in climate-related activities, to provide educational materials to actuaries around the globe and beyond, non-actuaries as well. So we understand that there's a lot of interest for our papers amongst non-actuaries or stakeholders, and to assist and liaise with our international stakeholders related to this topic, this area of practice. And you see the papers that have been produced by the Climate Risk Task Force over the past some years. So we started with a foundational paper, Importance of Climate-Related Risks for Actuaries. This was a basic paper and issued quite close to the start of the operation of the task force. And then there were two papers on climate-related scenarios, one as an introductory paper, and then more concretely on as insurance and other financial institutions. And the fourth paper focused on asset and what actuaries can do in relation to assessing assets and asset portfolios. So the other side of the balance sheet, not the traditional liability side. And then the fifth paper for us was the climate-related disclosures and risk management. This is a paper that reviews all the initiatives, and probably that might be the paper that becomes obsolete in a few years or maybe a few months, because there have been so many things happening, and there will be so many things happening in that area. but nevertheless, all papers will be reviewed and if needed, maybe amended. Then the next paper was the adaptation paper on adaptation gap that was released, I think, a few weeks ago only. So we hoped it would be out there in April, but yeah, but I think it was out early May. In the meantime, we managed to set up a good relationship with the United Nations IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, I guess that's the abbreviation, Working Group 1, which is working on the science behind climate change. And we managed to secure a joint paper with them on their assessment report and the results of the assessment report and results of the science behind that assessment report. The short title is Summary for Actuaries. So it was a very successful project. And so managed to push the green button. Future papers we are working on a seventh paper on social security, so that drafting team has already started its operation. There will be a final paper, an eighth paper, which will not be a paper on focusing on external things. It's going to be internal for the IAA and look at what important documents may have some gaps in relation to climate-related risks that might be improved in the future. And we are also working on a potential paper with Working Group 2, which deals with the vulnerabilities and adaptation. So our adaptation paper fits well into that potential joint piece of work. And finally, I would like to mention our glossary. All papers are available at the IA website. Glossary is an important piece of paper because if you read, you will find that some of the concepts that are there are special for climate-related risks, not necessarily the same as a standard actuarial terminology. So with that, my time has expired. Thank you for your attention. Maybe questions will be asked later on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Building on the progress made by the CRTF and reflecting on the next step, the EC has put together a climate risk action plan. Whoops, that's right. Has put together a climate risk action plan to coordinate activities related to climate issues. It involves monitoring the activities of the International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB. They are working on sustainability disclosure. It also involves placing ISAP 8 regarding sustainability disclosure on the strategic action plan for ISAPs. So, and such as work would involve disclosing risk and making future projection of potential outcomes, something that is very, very much aligned with the actuary's strength. Work on ISAP 8 will then follow with due process for the production of an approval of a statement of intent and subsequently the development of the actual ISAP 8 to be approved by council. And thirdly, the idea of having an accompanying international actual note to make it more practical for actuaries and more accessible. On this, I'd like now to, so that you can see what it looks like, have Andrew talking about the ISAP 8 and the work done at ASC. I'm going to.
Right, negotiate all these green buttons. Right. Bearing in mind that not all of you are totally familiar with the ASC's and ISAP's due process, I thought I would just briefly place some of this in context. In the last year, the IFRS trustees launched their new arm, the sustainability board within them. And they have moved very, very fast. They had consultations and they're now proposing to issue their first 2 standards, which they are going to call IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. S2 is the more important of the 2 in many ways, because it is very specific about what should be done in disclosing climate related issues in some way or another, not precisely defined because it's going to be jurisdictional based, a sort of accompanying company accounts and reports. This document is interesting in many ways because, unlike with the international financial reporting standards, which are very much accountant based, there is no natural home that follows sustainability reporting. And that actually is a huge, huge opportunity for actuaries, because what is it all about? It's about uncertainty in the future and the financial impact of uncertainty in the future. What has the actuarial profession been about for decades or centuries? That. It's a huge opportunity, and that is where the role of actuaries has to be underpinned by a framework. And ISAP 8 will give a tool to the standard setters around the world, whether it be FMAs themselves or independent standard setters, to draw upon in forming their requirements for actuaries working in this field and give credibility to the profession. So as Michelin has said, there are a number of stages we're going through. The ASC later this morning will be looking at the latest draft work from our task force on producing the statement of intent on ISAP 8. I'm hoping that we will be consulting on this SOI during the 3rd quarter of this year. And optimistically, because I like to be optimistic about these things, hoping to obtain approval of the SOI during the 4th quarter of this year, enabling work to commence in earnest at the start of next year. What is also worth reminding everybody of is that the due process for ISAPs contains a review requirement on the ASC, and quite rightly so. We are now in the stage of reviewing ISAPs 5 and 6, starting with 5, moving on to 6, which being involved with enterprise risk management in insurance are clearly very relevant documents in relation to climate risk. We also have next year due to review once again the underlying core ISAP 1, and clearly there will need to be changes to that to reflect the growing importance of climate in this to actuaries. So the ISC has a very full agenda, very driven at current time by climate and sustainability issues. And I hope I'm going to be 40 seconds early.
Let's welcome Derek Wright.
It's the famous button, yeah. Okay, Andrew's now given me a challenge that finishing 40 seconds early. I've only got 21 seconds left. Okay, good morning. Right, okay, I was told my slides had changed, but it doesn't look as if they have. So, yeah, okay. So an international actuarial note. This is a note on an education document to help actuaries working in a particular field, to assist in complying with an ISAP. So in this case, complying with ISAP 8 as it's developed or once it's developed. But also, as it says here, to help implement a standard coming, well, when this was initially written, IFRS, but now we need to expand that to ISSB as well. Sorry, my notes have disappeared, right? Okay. I'll meet the challenge, Michelin, don't worry. Possibly. So what would the IAN look like? Well, it's likely to have a number of substantive chapters. We will probably have two sections initially, one on S1, which is the sustainability disclosures, and the second on S2, being the climate-related disclosures. And Andrew mentioned that the documents that came out, or the draft standards that came out last year, which we responded to, and we're expecting the final standards out later in June this year. And so we will need to be putting the IAM based around those final standards. It will be a bit like IAM 100, basically around a series of questions and answers. But we also keep it fairly flexible, so that if ISSB, not ISSN, my fat fingers, develop further standards, we can potentially update that particular IAM. The team to draft this will comprise of people from across the IAA. The Insurance and Accounting Committee have been asked to lead on this, but we'll have representation from them, from the Client Risk Task Force, Pensions, Insurance Regulation, the REVF, the ISAP 8 Task Force, and so on. There is plenty of space on that drafting team. And so, you know, if volunteers could come and see me in the corner over there, or I'll just pass a piece of paper around and we'll get everybody's name. But it would be really good to get as many volunteers as possible into that group from across different sections from across the world. And with 1 minute 47, I think I win the competition so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Andrew and Derek. As the work is progressing with the ASC and the insurance accounting, the plan envisage consultation with FMAs to assess developing needs. And with that information, there will be a new roadmap developed for the years to follow 2023 to 2026. So you'll hear more about this, and we're continuing on planning for the future. Part of this, in addition to the above that I've just talked about, there's two projects that have been identified by SPC related to the UN Sustainable Development Goals that you've heard about earlier today, and are presented for approval at Council in a few days. Roseanne Harris, immediate past president and chair of SPC, will address the global SDG project and its intent. Roseanne. Whoops. Oops.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Here we are in Sydney. So Bazana and Naomi, thanks for having us, all the stops and starts, and here we are. So very happy to be here in Sydney. So yes, the groundwork for this, for my little talk has been laid for me this morning by Jan Kellert's address earlier about the Sustainability Development Goals. And I'm sure that the message is loud and clear from that presentation that we as a profession have a lot to contribute in this space. So in 2015, the United Nations set up these 17 Sustainability Development Goals, the SDGs as they're referred to. I couldn't fit all 17 on the slide here, but the aim is to achieve them by the year 2030. And the way that the United Nations has characterized them is that they are a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. So that sounds a little bit like an actuarial mission statement to me. And of course, there's a lot of interconnectedness in these goals. And that interconnectedness is around environment, around social issues, and of course, economic aspects as well. And this is the intersection of topics and issues which we are well placed to contribute to. In addition to that, for each goal, the United Nations has identified specific targets and along with that indicators. So for countries that are measuring and monitoring their progress towards these targets in 2030, there's around 169 indicators to measure. And of course, if we're completing our actuarial control cycle, measuring and monitoring is part of what we do as well. So I hope you're getting the idea that, that this is an area where actuaries have a huge contribution to make, both in the public interest, but also from a general sustainability point of view, which affects the work that we're all doing. Now, there's some cross-cutting themes that you can see across these goals. So issues like gender equality, education, culture, health, and of course, health has got a big emphasis as well when we look at things like environmental issues. There's also some trade-offs around things like ending hunger and economic growth and environmental issues that you can see that there can be the potential for conflict. So it's important that that we can contribute to how to balance those conflicts. As you've seen, we've done extensive work already. Let's see if I can move this on, around climate risk. So as Micheline highlighted, that was something that that certainly her contribution pioneered, and Gabor has picked ably up on the work that we've done on climate risk. And we're also planning some detailed work on the water related risk as well, which Micheline is going to talk a little bit more about. But if we're going to make a meaningful contribution to risk management globally, we need to think about how this fits in with the Sustainability Development Goals as this blueprint as an overall reference point. So the kind of work that you'll have seen set out in the SOI, which is on the council agenda for a few days' time, is looking at the contribution that we can make. Now, the important thing about that SOI is it's not to say that the work related to SDGs is going to be done in a task force. It's more that that task force would form a coordination function, and that we're encouraging all of the entities within the IAA to be thinking about the contribution that the work they are doing is making to the attainment of these Sustainability Development Goals. So you'll see that the kind of steps that are involved here is, first of all, gathering information about what is being done across the IAA, as well as amongst our member associations, so that we can leverage off the work that has been done around the various entities, both within and external. And a part of this work is also creating awareness amongst the actuarial profession and the potential that we have to support these Sustainability Development Goals and to build appropriate partnerships in doing that. So as you are engaging in your deliberations over the next few days, please think about this theme, as well as, of course, the contribution that your member associations are making in this important initiative. So look forward to lots of discussions, both in the corridor and the sessions over the next few days. Thanks, Micheline.
Thank you. Yes, so and Roseanne just referred to SDGs. One of the SDGs is the one that relates to water-related risk. and has already been identified as a priority by the Strategic Planning Committee. The task force exploring the topic discovered in doing their work that water has a much greater impact than first envisaged, although we were convinced at the start that it was a major topic. Many human activities are disturbed when there is either too much water, too little, or where the water is not clean or clean enough. The number of industries that depend on water is enormous, yet we rarely reflect on that as we expect water to be available to all. Agriculture requires water to grow food, nuclear plants, water for cooling or in our security. River transportation need decent water levels. Mining industry processes often require massive amount of water, yet water is often not adequately priced for nor used with care. The projects expect to create awareness on the broad implication of water risk. We intend to work with scientists to explain to us actuaries the dynamics of water as it is now, but also as it will evolve over time, so that we can model the various water risks to better manage them and adapt to change in a timely manner. The intention is to focus on implications for insurance and repercussion for investment portfolios. Hopefully you will get us your support for voting to work further on this. As I said, it's a very important topic. This concludes the presentation. We do have some time, Mathieu. We do have 9 minutes for questions. And it's questions all related to all the topic of the climate and sustainability. So whether it's Gabor, Derek, Andrew, or Roseanne, please. Okay, so we've been very clear. Okay. Well, okay, well, I guess. Oh, well, it would take you. So I guess to you address your question first.
Who am I addressing it to? Maybe Roseanne.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It's a larger question. So my question is, how does all the environmental work and climate change work interact with the larger topic of SDG and also ESG? And what role does the IAA play in that?
Yes, please, Roseanne.
I don't know if I'm on. Can you? Oh, there I am. Thanks, Terry. Thank you. I think that's a really important point, which perhaps I didn't make clearly enough, is, as you say, that ESG is something that is top of mind from a corporate reporting perspective, and that often when we're thinking about SDGs, we're thinking about it in the context of, you know, national projects and the kind of projects that the opening presentation was covering. But in fact, the monitoring and measurement of those goals is very closely related to the concept of ESG and our triple bottom line, where again we have that intersection of economics and social issues and environmental issues. So I think it's really important to flag that link, that we don't just think, well, SDGs are something that is at a national level, but it also filters down to the corporate reporting level too. So yep. Excellent point to flag.
Great,
thanks, Terry.
Any other brave person? Yes.
Perhaps I would add that I think the IA needs to consider the whole picture and what to do. And when it comes to doing something, the IA has limited resources. So the IA has picked particular issues to address, and it would be too much, and it would be against the renewal, that doing all things, some of these climate and some of the SDGs as Michelle mentioned. So I think it's important to keep in mind that the broader landscape and what the IA as an organization can do. Thank you.
Yeah, it is indeed an enormous topic. We have to start with some project, try to identify the most important thing. If it was, yes, I see there's another brave person asking questions.
Yes. So I think if we say that the climate change is the scope of actuaries, actuaries have to understand the climate or like a meteorology, like academic
Yes.
issues. And so what's the plan for the changing the
syllabus?
Curriculum, or yeah,
sorry?
The syllabus, sorry, the
Syllabus.
syllabus. And for example, like in the past, or currently, we are managing the catastrophe risk, but basically, in my understanding, actuaries don't have that much expertise on the climate, the nat cat risk, but we are relying on more on the vendor models like RMSAIR. So, but in the future, if we say that the climate change is our scope, I think actuaries have to understand more about the climate. So I just want to.
Okay, no, that's a very important item here. As we write some of the papers, for example, I was thinking CRTF. The first paper was about why it's important and so on, but the second was, okay, where is the science? What is the reliable sources with lots of information? You want to, okay. And we're doing the same with water. And in fact, we've have approached a scientist from that worked on the topic, especially with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And so some have been receptive to work with actuaries because it makes their work more of use. But nevertheless, I mean, you're also asking a question about the syllabus itself. And I don't know if I want to pass that question to Henning, but the idea of refreshing the syllabus is out there, but it's a big endeavor, I would say. So I don't know, Henning, if you want to. No, he's okay. So that, and we have Andrew.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment on that. Just think about the history of the actuarial profession. It started entirely with mortality. But the medical profession and others are clearly experts in a lot of the things that lead to people dying. We as actuaries don't necessarily have to be experts in every aspect of these risks that we are reviewing. What we have to be able to do is to understand what these other people are telling us, these other professions, these other expertises are saying, and apply it. And that has been the skill of actuaries over time. This is the sort of point I was trying to make myself in my remarks. So we don't actually have to suddenly introduce advanced climate science into our syllabuses. We have to understand what they're telling us.
Okay. We haven't.
Just real quick, one quick comment. There's actually a risk book chapter on cat models, which is probably useful reading for a student who wants to get familiar with how things are done.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, thank you. It is really great to see how much work is done on the climate issue. I remember 20 years ago when people who talked about climate were a bit of oddballs here. But really my question is about the S part and how actuaries will survive there. I mean, in climate, we are easily on the side of the good guys. But with the S part, with our risk analysis, risk differentiation, we are easily in the area of discrimination. So in the world where S is becoming more important, inclusiveness is rising. At least in Europe, there are ideas about the right to be forgotten. For example, your medical records are not allowed to be used in all cases. How do actuaries who want to differentiate between risks survive in the world where there is many things that are called discrimination, that or many things that are thought to make inclusiveness impossible. Thanks.
As always, Esko, you ask very good questions, and often well in advance that we're ready to answer them. So it's we're keeping note of it. Roseanne, you want to say a few words on this?
Yeah, well, maybe just to thank ISCO for flagging this important aspect, and I think this is why our profession plays an important role in being that conscience to make sure that that risk transfer doesn't, or risk management, sorry, doesn't just mean risk transfer to vulnerable people who are not equipped to carry it. So the protection gaps aspect of the implications of various risk management initiatives, and of course these developments that we're seeing globally in the space of the development goals of ESG objectives, and the protection gaps that have emerged over the last 2 to 4 years. Really important area of focus of work for us to be thinking about in our deliberations. Thanks, Micheline.
Thank you very much. This will conclude our meeting today, right in time, I think. And so thank you very much for your attention. I hope you find this session useful in understanding what's happening in some of the areas of activities of the IAA. And I look forward to talking to you in the corridors or in the meetings, and so many exchanges between yourselves too. So have a very nice meeting.